The Gaza flotilla ship Madeleine, carrying activist Greta Thunberg as well as 11 other people, has been captured by the Israeli military. This is the moment Israeli soldiers boarded the ship in the early hours of this morning. Calm down. The UN Special Rapporteur for Palestine, Francesca Albanese, has been in constant communication with the ship's crew and was speaking with the captain when the ship was boarded. On Radio 4's Today programme, she described the build-up to its capture.
First, they were surrounded by Israeli speedboats, and this was the first time I heard them under stress. The second is when, after saying that everything was calm, they had not been intercepted, they were flown over by 2 quadcopters, so drones which can shoot, and then they were thrown at some substance, we don't know what was it, and they went undercover. And third is I was on the phone with them when the boat was intercepted and there were Israeli soldiers boarding the boat and taking them out. And this is when the communication with the captain was abruptly interrupted.
Albanese referred to a white substance being fired at the boat from quadcopters before the boarding. Now, it's not known exactly what that substance was, but one of the ship's crew members, this is activist Yasmin Akkar, posted this video after the drones attacked.
Okay, we are masking our face right now. We have quadcopters right above our heads, the most dangerous ones, and they are, I don't know what this is. I'm so sorry. We don't see anyone coming. We don't know what this is, if this is paint or some chemical. No idea, but please sound the alarm.
So how did the Israeli attack on the ship unfold? Well, on Sunday afternoon, Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz issued this warning to the crew of the ship who were attempting to break Israel's 3-month-long siege on Gaza. So he said this: "I have instructed the IDF to act to prevent the Madeleine hate flotilla from reaching the shores of Gaza and to take whatever measures are necessary to that end. To the anti-Semitic Greta and her fellow Hamas propaganda spokespeople, I say clearly, you should turn back because you will not reach Gaza. Israel will act against any attempt to break the blockade or assist terrorist organizations at sea, in the air and on land." At around 3 a.m. local time, Israel followed through on that threat. Having left Sicily on the 1st of June, the ship and its crew had travelled across the Mediterranean and were still around 180 kilometres away from Gaza when the assault took place. Now, that put the Madeleine firmly in international waters, with human rights attorney and Freedom Flotilla organiser Huwaida Araf saying this: "This seizure blatantly violates international law and defies the ICJ's binding orders requiring unimpeded humanitarian access to Gaza. These volunteers are not subject to Israeli jurisdiction and cannot be criminalised for delivering aid or challenging an illegal blockade. Their detention is arbitrary, unlawful, and must end immediately." After the Israeli military boarded the ship, soldiers ordered the crew to throw their phones into the sea, and communications with the Madeleine were cut off. Obviously, the Israelis have nothing to hide. That's why they make you throw your phones into the sea when they illegally stop your ship, which is just trying to deliver aid to people that the Israelis are starving. The Freedom Flotilla, though, did release a number of pre-recorded messages from the crew, including this from Thunberg.
My name is Greta Thunberg and I am from Sweden. If you see this video, we have been intercepted and kidnapped in international waters by the Israeli occupational forces or forces that support Israel. I urge all my friends, family and comrades to put pressure on the Swedish government to release me and the others as soon as possible.
A few hours later, Israeli media released these images of the crew. So you can see Israeli soldiers there handing out bottles of bread and water to the volunteers who appeared to be refusing their supplies. At the same time, the Israeli Foreign Ministry released this statement: "The selfie yacht of the celebrities is safely making its way to the shores of Israel. The passengers are expected to return to their home countries, while Greta and others attempting to stage a media provocation whose sole purpose was to gain publicity, and which included less than a single truckload of aid, blah, 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 blah. There are ways to deliver aid to the Gaza Strip. They do not involve Instagram selfies." And they say the tiny amount of aid that was on the yacht will be transferred to Gaza through real humanitarian channels. Now, it's sort of strange to say this was a media stunt. Yes, it was a media stunt. That's the whole point. The whole point is that these are activists who are saying you are wrong to be starving 2 million people in an act of collective punishment. Therefore, we are going to get media attention by actually taking some real personal risks, because we know that flotillas like this, volunteers on them have been killed, shot dead by the Israeli military. So they were taking real risks to get attention for a very, very important issue, which is the Israelis intentionally causing famine conditions for 2 million people, half of them kids. I mean, the Madeleine is now on its way to the Israeli port of Ashdod, where Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz has ordered the military to show them the country's film about the 7th October attacks. And the Israeli Foreign Ministry has also said that all 12 volunteers will be deported to their home countries. Now, the governments of those home countries have so far been pretty muted about the boarding of the Madeleine. French-Palestinian MEP Rima Hassan is one of those on board, but there has been no statement from the French government, nor have there been responses from the Brazilian, Dutch, or German governments, who also have citizens on board. The Madeleine itself, it turns out, was also flying the UK shipping flag, meaning the British government has jurisdiction over it. That led UN Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese to post this. As the Madeleine was reportedly intercepted and seized by Israeli forces in international water, the UK government must urgently seek full clarification and secure the immediate release of the vessel and its crew. The Madeleine must be allowed to continue its lawful humanitarian mission to Gaza. And the British government, for its part, has not yet released an official statement, with a Downing Street spokesperson simply saying it wants Israel to resolve the situation, quote, safely, with restraint, in line with international humanitarian law. In contrast, international aid agencies have sounded the alarm over the ship's capture. Amnesty International have said this. By forcibly intercepting and blocking the Madeleine, Israel has once again ignored its legal obligations towards civilians in the occupied Gaza Strip. The crew were unarmed activists and human rights defenders on a humanitarian mission. During its voyage over the past few days, the Madeleine's mission emerged as a powerful symbol of solidarity with besieged, starved, and suffering Palestinians amid persistent international inaction. However, this very mission is also an indictment of the international community's failure to put an end to Israel's inhumane blockade. Activists would not have needed to risk their lives had Israel's allies translated their rhetoric into forceful action to allow aid into Gaza. States must act now or risk complicity in Israel's grave violations of Palestinians' rights. I think it's a bit late for saying they'll risk complicity, but I don't want to nitpick. I think that's generally a good statement from Amnesty International. Ash, what do you make of what we've seen? Obviously, as I said, sort of previous flotillas to Gaza have been met with much stronger force than this, which I suppose shows why Greta Thunberg was really very brave to take part in it. Because I think Israel is willing to get a lot of bad publicity, but they don't want to kill Greta Thunberg, presumably.
Well, look, I'm going to say something. I don't know how our audience is going to react, because obviously we're quite a left-wing channel. We've got quite a left-wing audience. But where are the conservatives? Where are the patriots? Because you've got a boat, a ship, which is flying a UK flag in international waters, which has been boarded by a foreign navy. You've had an unidentified substance. I saw one report in the Telegraph indicating there might be something called stink water, which is an irritant. It's really nasty stuff. And this vessel was not only behaving in a totally lawful manner, but it was actually carrying out its lawful duties to break what is recognized to be an illegal blockade, right? Where are the conservatives and the patriots? Because I absolutely guarantee you that if it had been, for instance, Somali pirates or Yemeni Houthis who had boarded and kidnapped the crew of a vessel that had been flying a British flag in international waters, the Telegraph would be demanding the involvement of the armed forces. The Royal Navy would be on its way. But there's something about Israel, something about how we facilitate an ongoing genocide, our decades, if not centuries long complicity in these acts of ethnic cleansing and violence, which mean And, that there are worse things that Israel does out in the world. But, here's something which I'm talking about right now. It means that Israel kind of gets to, and apologize for my language, cuck us. Just treat us like a bunch of cucks, right? So, British flag, international waters now, we're going to board your ship. When it comes to also having, killed British nationals who have done, Palestine solidarity work, in Gaza and in the West Bank. It turns out that Israel is allowed to do that too. And yet we provide them diplomatic cover. The US sends them billions and billions of dollars in international aid. We let Israel's advocates in this country dictate to our elected governments what it is British citizens can and can't say in their criticism of Israel. In the United States, you've got American police, universities, and immigration acting as an arm of the Israeli state when it comes to the detention of the likes of Mahmoud Khalil. And there is something about this which is, offensive to me as a left winger. But if you're somebody who stands by the flag, who believes in this country, wants to stand up for the status of this country, why do you give Israel a free pass? They're treating us like cucks, Michael, and I can't take it anymore.
Talking about giving Israel a free pass, let's look at some of Britain's worst media outlets and characters. So the Freedom Flotilla's Madeleine, of course, didn't make it to Gaza before being attacked by Israel, but its crew, as we've said, took on grave personal risks to draw the world's eyes to the Israeli-imposed humanitarian crisis in the Strip, where Palestinians are literally starving to death. And of course, that's something the British media class despises. This is how LBC reacted to the capture of the ship by Israel. So using language which was straight from the Israeli government, it described the ship's mission as a selfie yacht stunt. The Sun parroted Israel too, describing the ship as a Freedom Flotilla stunt and hoping Thunberg would learn a lesson. And Piers Morgan said this: "Oh, shut up, Greta Thunberg, you attention-seeking narcissist. What an insult to the actual hostages in Gaza who really were kidnapped. This stupid stunt is all about your ego and will make zero difference to the plight of innocent Palestinians caught up in this dreadful war." Ash, you've got an ongoing relationship with Piers Morgan. How would you respond to that?
Oh, don't say it like that.
Come on, you're thick as thieves.
I mean, look, when it comes to Greta Thunberg, the reason why she is so hated by members of our media establishment is because they cannot stand people who live their beliefs and do so with integrity. And so that's why they're constantly trying to say she's a narcissist, she's shrieking, she's just doing this for attention, it's all a stunt. They try and get her on hypocrisy. They have to tear her down because her integrity is an inherent rebuke to their corruption and their venality. And you see it all the time. You see it, for instance, with the way in which Owen Jones is treated by people who are supposed to be his colleagues. His vociferousness in what he believes in is treated as though it's some kind of war crime. It's treated as the gravest of sins. And I think it's because, in part, he holds up a mirror to our media culture. I mean, I saw a tweet from Benjamin Butterworth, who was a senior reporter at the I paper. And he was scoffing, something like, "Oh, I'm old enough to remember when the left didn't like it when, white people dressed up in, the ethnic garb and presented themselves as white saviors." And it was a picture of Greta Thunberg flying a Palestinian flag and wearing a keffiyeh. And I just thought, how fucking embarrassing for you. Because, it's one thing to be part of the Israeli PR machine, which is why, in a sick way, I've got more respect for the likes of, Sipi Hotoveli or Elon Levy, because, they believe what they believe and, they're out doing it. With the likes of Benjamin Butterworth or Piers Morgan, they're perhaps even unwitting participants in the Israeli PR machine because they're driven by their petty loathing of somebody who makes them feel, morally judged in some way. And that's so much stupider somehow, it's their egos that are affronted. And so they end up weighing in behind Israel and taking on Israel's talking points wholesale. I mean, the relevant information here, which, you barely hear from these, big, powerful media players, is that this was an unlawful boarding and detention, effectively a kidnapping. That the vessel was sailing under a UK registration, that it took place in international waters, and that Israel's blockade on Gaza is unlawful, and they have a history of killing those who have tried to peacefully break the blockade. Right? That is relevant information. And you know what? You can still have your, veneer of I believe in a two-state solution, and there's bad on both sides. You can have your hollow politics if you want. I don't care. These are just facts, and these are facts that your audience is entitled to know. So every time you see a journalist or a media outlet concealing those facts, just know that it's not always because they're ideologically supportive of Israel, though that's often part of it. Sometimes it's just because they're too fucking stupid to look beyond their own petty media gripes. And so they can be led by the nose to weigh in behind Israel, which I think has somehow even less integrity than meaning to be part of the PR operation.
I mean, Piers Morgan calling anyone attention-seeking is also pot calling kettle black, isn't it?